There were no highways. There were no roads, literally just horse and wagon trails.
Because my life is so damn amazing, Herb. And it would not be this amazing had it not been for the people that decided to invest in me.
People that worked with me, they bet on a three-legged horse. And, it's like, why would you bet on a three-legged horse? But they did. I spent the better part of a half a century running away from God. And when my life got upended, Natasha, our CFO, was the one that said to me, you need community, like you had to come to church.
What is going on, L&M family? If you can't tell, I'm like jumping for joy, and I was kind of nervous and all riled up about today's interview because this is the second time I got to spend some time with him. He's been very generous, and he's a baller. Like, he's an OG. I send out a questionnaire of like, how do you want me to introduce you? And evidence of him being an OG was just Herb. And I love that because he's been there and he doesn't need all the showers of praise, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Mr. Herb has 45 years in the construction industry. He's impacted hundreds and hundreds of careers, which is one of the things that really caught my attention about the way he operates his business and his forward thinking, or at least maybe legacy mindset of what he's doing in the construction business. And even though he's back where he started, he is the CEO of Sargent. He's got tons of experience. I know we're going to get some beautiful, beautiful nuggets about what that is. And if you're new here, this is the Learnings and Missteps podcast, where you get to see how real people just like you are sharing their gifts and talents to leave this world better than they found it. I'm Jesse, your selfish servant, and you're about to get to know Mr. Herb. Mr. Herb, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, Jesse. So glad to talk to you again. I'm really disappointed. I saw you posted somewhere that you took somebody out for those famous tacos you promised me, but we couldn't make it work that day. Oh. I still got to get back to San Antonio for those tacos. But I did appreciate you taking time to meet with me on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, that's one of those things, missed opportunities that I'm going to have to check off the list, because we ended up connecting on a Sunday, and that taco place, Eddie's Taco House, they're closed on Sundays. So somehow or some way, we're going to make it happen. But you were ultra generous with your time. We hung out, had dinner. You shared some insights, not some, like lots of insights. And, for me as we'll say a budding entrepreneur, having that time with you really, I'll just say, boosted my confidence and solidified the ground underneath my feet to say, okay, I'm not doing this entirely wrong, especially with somebody of your stature. To gift me with that much time and that much insight was amazing.
Well, I don't know about my stature, but I will say this. I felt like it was my privilege to spend the time with you and hear your story, because it's a compelling story too. There's a lot of really great stories in this business, that are ground up stories, right?
Yes. So speaking of stories in the business, everybody wants to know, how easy is it to write the 100th year anniversary book?
I'll be honest with you. It's been easier than I thought it was going to be.
Really good.
I have these fits and starts where I pile away on it every day for 4 weeks, and then not touch it for a month, and then work on it again so I just started on it again today. I'm so fortunate that my grandfather kept a journal, my dad kept a journal. So I had those assets to fall back on, and those kind of carry me in overlap to the time when I started in the business. So, and of course, my knowledge of the business, my firsthand knowledge, is much denser than his long record. So what I'm finding is the further in time I get, the closest to now we get, the denser and denser the information becomes. And I've got to figure out the right balance, because I want to be careful that I don't give the early history the short sheet. I want to make sure everything gets represented right. But frankly, some of the more recent history in the company has been at least to today's people, some of the most important. So I've got all the background information that I really need to write it.
Yeah. So what's it like going through your grandfather and your father's journals? What is that experience like? I just have no concept. Like that's seems
Yeah.
pretty, it feels like it would be intense.
It can be, yeah. And my granddad, my grandmother was very ill shortly after they had kids. She had some mental illnesses as well as some physical illnesses, and it shows up in his journal. And while he had health that came in every day, and actually within health that helped, he took her everywhere he went. If he drove to Florida, he'd load her in the car and drive to Florida. They usually drove, he didn't fly all that much. So reading some parts of that, his life and how difficult life must have been for him with 5 children.
Wow.
And his wife was really, let's say this about right, in respect to her, but he couldn't depend on her being there because of her illness. It was pretty severe.
Right.
And the fact that he built this business starting at a time when really there were no highways, there were no roads to speak of. I mean, literally just horse and wagon trails. And then he was able to build this business in that period with 5 kids and that situation. Really tells a story about a guy that was not only really ingenious in his own way, really humble guy, super humble guy, but just a guy that never got overexcited. He was so level. And in fact, I was reading earlier today one of the New England construction did a story on him, and the writer was kind of saying, like, we're trying to picture Herb on a job site where he's, demeaning and swearing at all the men, like apparently they had witnessed elsewhere. And like, we can't picture this with this guy. So a lot of this stuff is really great. And he was such a great mentor to me. He passed away around, I think I was 43. So I knew him a good long time in my life. And we spent a lot of time together. So, yeah.
You've got a collection of journals that your grandfather wrote, a collection of journals that your father wrote. Was that kind of a practice like, hey, let's document our thoughts so that we can pass it on to the next generation? Or was it just something that kind of worked out that way?
I think it just worked out that way. I don't think either one of them thought, that would, like in 1943 when my grandfather started his journals, he'd been in business 17 years, but still a very small business. I don't think he thought anybody was going to be referring back and writing the 100th anniversary book, and that this would be handy to them at the time. I don't really know what his thought process was. And there were some periods across the decades where, he'd miss 9 months of a year, and he'd pick it up again and say, sorry, I missed the last 9 months or something like that. They were mostly factual things. Like my grandfather's were really only 4 or 5 lines. So they're just like, here's what happened today. My dad has got into more detail, but still factual stuff. There wasn't, neither one of them were like how they're feeling, or not like journaling in a therapeutic sense. It was more journaling in just kind of a record keeping sense. But my dad's are much more detailed, his could take up half a page. But he, frankly, I was going to say he had more going on, but I guess technically he did, but he had different technologies to help him, like the telephone, the computer, the automobile, the airplane, that my grandfather did not have early on.
Wow. And so being able to take that snapshot or a snapshot of back then, what are some consistent things that transferred to now with or without the technology? There's got to be some like human dynamic stuff that they're like, yep, it was the same then as it is now.
That's such a great question. And when, I can't remember if I've told you this,
but before you get to know, we're going to do the L&M family member shout out. This one goes out to Miss Claudia. Miss Claudia says, I had a wonderful opportunity yesterday to join a group of industry rock stars in their pursuit of continuous improvement. Jesse's time management workshop is just what I needed to get 2025 started with the right mindset. Claudia, thank you for taking the time to leave that message, because it just made me happy, because I don't want to waste people's time. And I'm glad that you had a good time. And folks, you already know, hit me up, leave a comment, leave a review, so that I can take the opportunity to shout you out in the future, and so that you boost my ego just a little bit, not too much, just a little bit. I just love to know who's out there listening and getting value from these conversations.
My dad and my uncle sold the business in 1988, and then I bought it back in 2005. And when we were combining my company with that company, we had a 2-day retreat, and one of the questions was, okay, like the tools we have today to work with don't even resemble what they had back then. Like it was small cable shovels and 2-yard dump trucks, and now we're dealing with, sometimes 50, 150, 200-ton excavators, 60-yard off-road trucks. We have GPS now. Back then it was tape measures and the hand level in grade stakes. What we were building back then was roads and airports primarily. There was, there were no landfills being built back then. There was barely any commercial work being done of any scale. So it was almost all infrastructure type work. Compared to now, we build landfills, airports, highways, commercial data centers, right? I mean, stuff like this that we've even dreamed of. So the tools we had then and now are totally different. What we build then and now are totally different. And so we realized that, and we said, okay, what has been the same for all these years? What has been the same? And basically what we came up with is we need to invest in people. That's been one of the same things, because Herb was a very staunch investor in people. We have to do the right thing, regardless if anybody's watching or not. We got to do the right thing. We got to always hone our craft. We got to get better every day at what we do, and these are our values. We got to win in the field, and winning in the field means everybody that's part of the project wins, regardless of where you are. If you're the owner, you feel like we're going to show up with a spirit of execution that says we're going to win this for you. And those are the 4 things that we wrote down that we codified as our core values.
Nice. The one thing that really comes across is invest in people. And I say it really comes across because I'm totally biased in that direction, right?
I know that about you. Great.
And because my life is so damn amazing, Herb, and it would not be this amazing had it not been for the people that decided to invest in me.
100%.
And there were periods of time when it was a bad investment and they did it anyways.
No, that's what I say. I say, Mike, people that work with me, they bet on a 3-legged horse. And, it's like, why would you bet on a 3-legged horse? But they did. And so, and when you recognize that, wait a minute, I'm a 3-legged horse, I better run my ass off. I mean, that investment in you propels you to do things more and better, and you want to respect that investment that they're putting in you and not let them down. That's, to me, a big thing.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. I'm like, okay, they see something, I'm gonna try like hell just so they ain't wasting their time. Right. And it turned into something.
Yeah.
Now, philosophically, I think most people would say, yeah, that's a great idea. But when it comes to operating a business, I mean, you're saying it's one of your 4 core values, but you're not just saying it, because you have a whole workforce development program that not just go to this class, but you help build careers and lives. Like, that is part of the system within your organization. That's a different thing than saying we believe in people, we're going to invest in them.
Yeah.
And so in terms of developing that thing, because we know where it came from, and I applaud you not just for listing that. Maybe you have the time horizon to say what was true then that is true now, which is brilliant. And maybe a lot of organizations don't have that. But there's still a level of commitment and sacrifice and courage that a leader has to make to actually invest dollars that help develop, nurture, and groom people. Was that just an easy press of a button? What was that like for you?
So, to be fair about our values, there have been periods in time when we have not been very good at them. or there has been a year when all our jobs didn't necessarily live up to those values, right? So to be fair about us, there was a period where we did not invest in people that much. And I will tell you, and I've said this and posted this online, my biggest mistake of my career is going through the Great Recession and not being at an altitude. We were flying low, not being at an altitude that allowed us to see 20 years ahead. And instead of investing in people during that period, because we didn't have the financial capacity to do that like we wanted to, we were frankly just trying to keep the plane in the air for the next mile. And so we did not invest much from let's say 2010 to 2014. And it became clear to me that, if we were going to be an organization that was durable, there's going to be sustainable, we need people. And in 2000, 10% of our people were under 25 years old. And 34% were under 40. So 66% were over 40. Okay? And in 2015, I think it was, I sat down, one of our regional managers, Kevin Gordon, a real good friend of mine, he and I started laboring together in 1983. And I said to Kevin, I need to do something different. We need to bring some people in. I need you to be our guy, our workforce advancement guy that goes to the high school and brings people in. And we're going to try to do 15, 20 people a year and bring in immediate high school grads and try to build our workforce back up. And he said, well, I don't think that's going to help us next year. And I said, Kevin, it's not for next year. It's for 2025. Right. It's for this year that we're in now. And so now our under 25 component, this is field work only, is about 25% versus 10% in 2012. It's at 25% now. And
nice.
And our under 40 component went from 36%, almost 56%. So we're in that range. So and that's in a growing workforce number, right? It's not like we just said, well, let's let all the old guys, die off or get rid of all the old guys. That's a growing component of a growing workforce. And I credit Kevin and Pete Perizzo at our office and my team, Eric Ritchie and Tasha Gardner, for believing in that investment. And when those investments started to gel in people, that's when we started really to take off as a company again. From 2018, 19, 20, 21 to now. And we've really just started taking off as a company. And I've shown our corporate altitude from 2005 to 2025 at the Build Lit area in our old summit. And, it showed our people getting smaller and smaller and smaller through the recession. And then we kind of came out of the recession, it shot up a little bit, but then we outgrew our people. And so I said, all right, now's the time we got to invest. And as we've grown those people and they've become players that were, in the AAA, I use a lot of sports analogies, AAA baseball players, we had them playing at the big league level for a while. But now they're playing at the big league level because we've really focused a lot of attention on it. We get some guys that came in from high school and put them through this academy we have. 2016, 2 people in specific I can think of that are both senior foremen for us. They'll be superintendents before long. And, these guys they came out of high school with
just needing a job.
Right. And our guys, Pete and Karen, they'll bring them in and they're teaching them how to cook chicken. They're teaching them how to go get groceries, how to get lunch and breakfast on $50 a week. And they literally make the budget out. They take them to the grocery store. They buy the food. They come back.
Wow.
And they put together the lunches. They teach them how to check into the hotel, and not track dirt all over the place, how to be respectful, check into the hotel, how to set up a checking account, making sure that health savings accounts are set up. And it's so much more than just and just what we can get out of them. It's really the way we see it. There's the professional piece that where most companies are interested in. There's the relational piece, the financial piece, the physical piece, and then the mental piece. That we want them to have margins of safety across all five of those if we can. I mean,
My
you
goodness.
probably heard stories over and over and over, and you may have had it yourself. I know I have. The biggest stress I had in a marriage was financial early on,
Yeah.
right? And it's okay if we can figure out the financial piece and make that go away as a hill we got to shed blood on, between our families. If we can make that go away, we can focus on the other things that really matter, like our relationship, our children, our families, our friends, that sort of stuff. That's the way we look at it.
Yeah. So two things, huge. One, the vision, right? Like the foresight to play the super long game. Cause I love that. Like, this ain't gonna help us next year. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
This is for 10, 15 years down the road. And like, just the courage that takes real courage to make that decision. Cause I'm sure there were more than one, at least more than one person saying, what the hell are we doing here? This isn't solving our problem right now. Second, you don't just have a workforce development program. You have a program that develops the whole person
that's what we work.
based on what you told me. Because, man, when I hit traveling jobs, this you may have never heard this story before, Herm, from anybody. But the first time I got hit for some traveling work, they gave me the per diem before I went to, like, so that I could pay for my hotel and all this stuff. And guess what?
You expect,
It lasted me one night. It was gone. I went and had a blast,
yeah,
and I was eating bologna and ramen for 10 days because I just had no, it was party money. It was like I had no
right.
foresight, right? I was thinking about right now, I got a few hundred extra bucks. I'm going to have to sleep in the truck now, and I'm going to eat bologna, and this is what it's going to be. It's easy because I've been in this position where I say, well, it's not my fault they don't know how to manage their money. And so for you guys to take ownership of that and say, let's teach them how to be successful with this bucket of resources that they have is tremendous.
I've seen it too many times. I had one of our employees been with us over 50 years. He came to me probably 4 years ago, and he said, if you gave me $150,000, I could retire. And the guy is close to 70. And I said, you've had a 401k for decades. And now we've got
Yep.
ESOP. He said, I know it. He said, my son's wife had cancer and I drained all their money.
Mm. Yeah.
And so that story is repeated over and over and over, stories like it. And so we're trying to teach people through this, our health savings account, put money away for health. Because if you don't
Yeah.
need it now in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you're going to need it when you turn the 60s and 70s. And this is almost just like another retirement account. They can put money in every year. We match the money.
Wow.
Just another retirement account that they could have another $200,000 to $200,000 in that account. So if they're going to need it someday, right? You and I are going to need it someday for healthcare. And so
Oh, yeah.
we're trying to hit them on every, and I think almost to the point where they become tone deaf to it in a way, but we try not
Sure.
to hit them with it, all these things at once. We try to, okay, now what about this? And Kevin and Pete and Kendall and Tim, our workforce advancement guys, when they go out on the field, they talk to these young guys about this stuff.
Yep.
And if they don't have it set up, they go, okay, let's go in the office trailer. We'll call the Maine office. We'll get this set up. And they take the time to do it. I mean, it's just such an important thing because, man, I've said this my whole career.
I'm sure that leaving this world better than you found it doesn't happen by accident. And I want to help you spend more time making this world better for yourself and the people you care about. So I want to invite you to the next Do the Damn Thing Time Mastery Workshop because we're going to be having some fun. We're going to be taking all those goals, those ideas, those projects, those dreams, the things that you keep putting off because of the commitment you make to work and the commitment you make to family and the commitment you make to everybody else except for yourself. When you get those out of your head and finally come up with a plan, make the space, find the time for you to make those things real, for you to actually get the ball moving on the things that are going to give more flavor and meaning to your own personal life. Check the show notes for the link. I hope to see you there, and back to the show.
If somebody comes and works in this business for 20, 30, 40 years, I mean, they're taking a lot out of their body. You know that.
Oh,
they
yes.
ought to be able to retire with a surplus that they made. I mean, they ought to be like this guy that came to me and wanted, and he knew he wasn't going to get $150,000, but
right,
you know, that's not very dignified for him. I feel bad for him. Now we're doing what we can to help him through retirement, working where we can, and but I'd rather have it's like the same thing of managing hazards versus managing injuries. When we're managing hazards, we're investing attention. When we're managing injuries, we're paying attention.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that distinction.
It's a huge difference. And when we're paying attention to injuries, our attention is off the management piece. We're over here. And that's when, that's when we get cream inside the head or something. We end up taking all our management time and putting it in injuries. So the same thing with finance, the same thing with all these other things. If we can learn, I think I heard it put, we need to stop pulling people out of the river and go upriver and figure out why they're falling in.
Yes. Well, it's getting in front of it. Again, it's a proactive approach to, okay, what can we do preemptively to create the conditions we want? If we don't do that, we're going to be in a reactive state that is not beneficial for anybody in the long term.
We're paying attention. But there's no return on. It's like paying taxes. It's like paying utility bills. That money's gone. There's no return back on it, right? But if you don't invest, so it's investment versus paying.
Yeah. Now, for the folks out there that are listening to this and saying, "Yeah, sure." That's easy for you to say now. How many people does Sargent employ right now?
Right now, we're around 525.
Cool, baby, 525. Yeah. And when y'all made the shift to say, okay, we're going to invest in our people, you started developing, because I'm sure the workforce development program has evolved over time.
Oh, yeah. Every year, it changes. I mean, literally, Kevin and Pete take a look at every single year, and we survey the people that go through it. Every piece of our training, they survey what went right, what went wrong, and we make adjustments. Those guys, they will not settle. But I interrupted your question.
No, that's beautiful. That's actually a phenomenal point. So the question, you're at 500 now.
Yeah.
You started this a while back. How many people did you have back then?
We were about 325.
Okay. So 60-ish% of where you're at now.
Yeah.
And so we're not talking, we're talking like serious dollars. We're talking people dedicated to manage and develop this program, deliver the training, the follow through, the feedback loop, the whole thing. This is a segment of your business. Would that be a misstatement?
It's becoming a bigger part of our business. The first year that we did that academy in 2016, I think we had 15 kids that came through it, and they cost us $11,000 a piece to put through a 6-week course. So it was almost $200,000 for that. Now we changed it pretty dramatically. Now it's a 2-week start, and then they go in the field, and then they come back for 2 weeks in the winter.
Yeah.
And so we, instead of just turning them loose, now we have the same set of weeks that we work with, but they get to go out and learn what they don't learn what they don't know, and come back and talk about how they put it into practice and how we can continue to build on that.
Yeah.
It has become a bigger piece of investment for us, the investing in people. those guys, when we started this, we had, superintendent foreman meeting every year for 3 or 4 days. And now we have training at every level multiple times in the wintertime. Those guys never stop. They really never stop.
Okay, so you said wintertime a couple of times. Why wintertime?
But we're in Maine. So in
Mhm.
Maine, quite often we can't work. Some projects you can work, but quite often we can't. Virginia and North Carolina, not quite as bad, but it can be a little iffy on work. So we tend to focus that. Historically, we need to make hay when the sun shines, which is primarily mid-April to mid-November.
Got it.
Yeah.
I want to point that out, right? Because I've said it and I've heard it said a bunch of times. We just don't have time, but we
Yeah.
do, right? There is time in our seasons and the way the business is operating. Having the whole winter, it's a different thing. But I think the principle that anybody can take from this conversation and apply to their business is when there's a downturn, we'll say slower season, what you're doing is you're capitalizing and leveraging that time to further develop your
Yeah, we
people.
are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would though, because I get a lot of comments, well, you're a big company, you can afford to do this stuff. I just want to highlight that this is more a posture of intention and wanting to help people than it is an expensive. In other words, it doesn't have to be expensive, it has to be intentional. So what I mean by that is if you're a company with 5 or 10 people, if your heart is coming from the right place, that I'm going to bring people in and I'm going to help them grow, then you will find a way to do it. If your posture is that, you'll do it without even knowing it. And I think that's the way a lot I think probably some of your mentors, I know my mentors, they didn't say, I'm gonna mark out an hour on the calendar and talk to her. That was just the
Right.
way they were, right?
Yes.
So if you can motivate your heart to grow to that place, like the Grinch 3 times, if you can get in that posture, I want to grow people. I'm here for people. All it has to be is intentional, not expensive.
I love it. And you're 100% right. I've had some leaders, and I got to admit, like I've been ultra fortunate in the volume of amazing leaders that I've come across that have, for whatever reason, decided to pour into me. Or maybe, like you're saying, they probably did it for everybody. And I just think I was special,
Exactly.
right? But it's just the way they rolled. It's just their mindset, the way they operated. They invest in people. And I think now, I heard somebody say, I was listening to a podcast this morning, this money thing, right? People just want money. You got to give them more money. People are asking for ridiculous amounts in salary. And it's no. Every job, everything that's out there, there is a dollar amount that somebody's going to get paid. It's not like the differentiator is what else as an employer are you offering of value that is exceeding the minimum, which is money that everybody else is giving. And that conversation went into the key, or that whoever that guru secret that was talking is like, my promise to people, the thing that I'm offering, that value point that I'm offering recruits, is that I'm going to develop their career. I'm going to support them in reaching the objectives and goals that they have in mind. And then the question the interviewer asked, so does it have to be in line with the business? And she said, no. It's like, it would be great if their biggest goals were to be the VP of everything or whatever. But some of them just want to start a new business. Some of them just want to learn another language. Some of them want to start something with their kids. I'm going to help them with that. What do you think about that, Herb?
To me, like our academy that we had, so we put about over 10 years, about 150 to 200 people through it. Our retention is about 40%. It's not as high as I'd like to see it, but it's, but you're getting 18-year-olds that don't know really what they want to do, right? So there's that. But at the same time, Kevin expressed to me concern, geez, we're only got 40%. And I said, that's fine with me. The other 60% are going out there, at least they know how to attack life. At least they're aware of retirement and planning around retirement. at least we've talked to them about relationships a little bit. At least they know that there's such a thing as a food budget that they can make. They understand that there's a day they're going to lose a transmission or a rear end in their truck. And they don't want that to become a crisis immediately. They just want it to be a problem that they manage. So again, if they have some margin of safety in their life, then that's what we want. I've got I say young guy, he's probably in his mid 40s now, I guess. And he owns a business a couple hours north of us in a small town. He's started his business from scratch and was a great employee for us. We had really good, high hopes for him. And the day he gave his notice, it was kind of like, man, that's too bad. We're going to lose him. But when I heard his plans, I said, this is going to be good for him and it's going to be good for his community because he's going to go in there and he's going to employ some people. And if there's a project to be built, right, somebody's going to build it. So it's not like in the construction world, we go create employment. We do a job that somebody was going to do no matter what. Yep. But what we do it with and the way we do it and the way we treat our people and the way they come out of that job is really the important thing to us. And so this guy, Josh, that I'm talking about, him going to start this little company in Holton, Maine, is going to be better for the community than somebody else doing it. It's not going to do the community things and the employee things that Josh is doing. And wow. And he's making a huge difference in that little town up there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I don't know what he wants to do for his future. I think he just wants to stay in that town and be a really upstanding member of that community, and he already is.
Yeah, and that's beautiful, right? I mean, that's I remember having the conflict of I was real critical of people because they didn't want more, right? Because I was in charge of the training, the workforce development program for a little bit. And I would see potential and talent in people, and I would kind of force them down a path, whether they liked it or not. I just decided this is what you're going to do, and I'm going to make you do it. And a lot of the guys are like, I don't want to be a foreman. I don't want to be a superintendent. And I would get super irritated. Like, why not? Don't you want more for yourself? Until my buddy Fernando, he pulled me to this. He said, Jesse, here's my deal. I'm involved. He was involved. His motorcycle club, they had a little nonprofit where they did every year, seasonally, 4 times a year, they had a bike fair, if you will, like where they would get donations and get a bunch of bikes and assemble the bikes for Christmas and hand them out to the kids in this low income part of San Antonio. And they would do a fan drive during the summer so they could get box fans and distribute them in the community where they didn't have air conditioning. It's super, super damn hot and they need some kind of circulation. He said, Jesse, if I take on this foreman role, I'm not going to be able to spend my time doing these things. And this is more important to me. And I swear when he said, I was like, oh my God, I never considered that there are other ways to contribute to our community beyond just advancing up the organizational chart. Yeah. And that's meaningful. And so I had to calibrate my ambition a little bit after that one. I had to eat a little bit of humble pie on that one.
And, I can say for myself personally, I told my son this, my son's not in this business. My son's a musician and I respect the hell out of what he does.
Yeah.
And I remember one time we're driving down the road and he was maybe 14, he's 30 now. And I said, what do you think you want to do when you grow up? And he said, oh, I don't know. You're the third generation of the business. And I said, time out. You do you. And I'm doing what I love. Now, fast forward 10 years and went through a particularly rough time personally. And I'm talking to him and I said, this thing about climbing the ladder, that in itself is almost addictive, right? And get that next rung. And then what you find out is when you get on that next rung, your footing of the ladder is in quicksand. And you're not any fucking higher. You're just another rung on the ladder.
Yeah.
I mean, you might be higher in the company, but you're lower in life. And
yes.
And so be careful what you want. And I'm not saying, I'm happy people want and aspire to be management because our company would be dead without Eric and Tasha and Don and Justin and all these people that are moving up into roles that are going to drive us ahead for the next 20 years, 30 years. But it shouldn't be at the cost of someone's soul.
Yes.
It ought to be
Yes.
all those steps on the ladder ought to contribute to a better human
Yes.
with more dignity,
Yeah.
more spirit, not less dignity and less spirit.
Yeah. And it's a tricky path, right? Because I love that going up the ladder. I was not going up the ladder. The ladder just kept sinking because my whole life experience was out of whack.
Yeah.
It was a disaster because it wasn't for me until I realized, wait a minute, what if I did things that bring me fulfillment? What if I shared the things that I've been blessed with in service to others? And then when I started doing that, it was like, oh my goodness. I mean, heck, it put me in front of you. Now, you mentioned like maintaining one's soul. And unfairly, I get to brag. I got to get a glimpse or a preview of what your speech was going to be at the Build Wit conference here in San Antonio. And you shared a little bit about a real personal experience that you had as an individual that I think, I don't know, maybe hundreds of thousands of men in construction, not just men, but I feel like men have that experience because of the expectations and dynamics that are out there around what it is to be a man in construction. And so I'm wondering, how do you feel about shining a little bit of light of what you shared at that conference?
Well, it's out there now. So I think what you're referring to is a project I was on. I was about 23 years old, and we were installing sewer in this town, really deep, big sewer, like 48-inch concrete pipe, 25 feet deep in the ground. Really, really tough situation. I mean, anybody that's listening or watching this knows that works in underground utilities. If you've got pipes that kind of cross each other or skew, it's a nightmare. And we had a water line, an old cast iron water line that just kind of wandered off and on our line, and we break it every day. And you know, it was a nightmare. It was cold in the middle of winter. Somebody might say, well, why didn't you run temporary water? Because that would have frozen on top of it
Right.
the first night. So we were fighting this water line all the way through. And we had to have this job done on the Friday before Christmas. And so we're going along, and this is 1986, so we didn't have all the weather apps we got now, right? We didn't have all this stuff. We didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
We didn't have computers or email or internet or any of that. So we're going at it, and we get up in the morning on this Friday, and it's snowing like a bastard. I mean, a blizzard. And so we know, the crew's looking at me, and I'm like, come on, we got to get out there and get to work. I'm going with you. So we all go out. We start digging this hole. You get this manhole set, the last manhole, get the pipe in, and we need to pour a concrete cradle around the manhole and the pipe. But it's a blizzard, and there's no ready-mix suppliers that are going to sell, right. So I finally got hold of one guy. He was like 2 hours away. They sent the truck, and the inspector said, you can't use it because that mode's hot. It's been in the truck too long. So now it's 4 in the afternoon, and this time of year in Maine, it gets dark at 4 o'clock. It's 4 in the afternoon. It's dark. It's still snowing like crazy. And I had to make the decision to backfill the hole so we could open the street out for Christmas and all of this. And we're all in, and we're beaten down. We're beaten pups. We're back in the office trailer. We're, chipping the ice off our clothes that had accumulated. We're soaked to the bone. I look over, and the phone, we had a message machine on the phone, and it was flashing. I just checked the message, and it said, call me.
Yeah.
And I think it said, if it's after work, you don't call my house. So I said, all right. So I just told everybody, you got to take off. Like, no cell phones. I could only make the call from the trailer or wait 2 hours till I get home. So I got everybody out of the trailer, and I made the phone call. And what I heard was, did you get it done? I said, no. A fucking 5-year-old could read the contract and know this has to be done. We put you on that job because we thought we could trust you. And those two things, those two phrases, one was an assault on my intellect, and the other was an assault on my person. They thought they could trust me.
Yep.
And I drove home, and all the way home, I was writing my suicide note, my brain. Because I said to myself at 23 years old, if it's this way, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And, the other thing I shared at the conference, at the Dirt Road conference, is my childhood was very challenging. And I don't think, I say this, and no worse than millions of other kids, right? But I
Right.
say this only because I think people go, well, this guy's the CEO of a big construction company, he probably never had problems in his life. That's not true, but suicide was something that was on my mind as a kid. That's where I could go. That was like a rest area for me.
Got you.
That was
Thinking about it.
like I could say, you know what, I'm just going to pull over here and think about not being here tomorrow, not ever seeing the shit that I'm seeing. And I never got to the point where I was like starting to plan things out, but it was always a place that I could go. And it was almost,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, like I said, it was like a rest area on the highway. And so that's where I went that evening. And I remember I got home, and my girlfriend, I just kind of walked right past her into the shower because I was freezing my ass off. And I got in the shower and I just started bawling.
Wow.
And I walked out and she said, "Are you okay?" She noticed my eyes are red. And I said, "Yeah, I just got salt in my eyes. Let's go get a beer."
Of course.
Right? That's what we do.
Yep.
It's time for the industry to be different. I guess that's why I told that story. When I got up there to tell that story, I didn't know what I was going to say. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I didn't know how far I was going to go in telling that story. I just decided, you know what, there's no sense of leaving anything on the table now. So I told that what I just said. And I'm not, I don't really want to be running around the country telling that story, right? It's not like I'm looking for speaking gigs to tell that stuff, but because my kids don't even know that, right? My brother and sister don't even know that story. But it's a real thing. So, and it's time those of us in the industry that have faced the real thing and want something different for the new people coming into the industry stood up and talked about it. And I was greatly inspired by a guy named Dr. Vince Hafeli, who got up and told a similar story.
Wow.
And he was before me. And my whole point in that sharing, we can do a lot better in our industry. We can lead with love.
Absolutely.
We have a chance in this industry to make such a difference for people and in people. And the idea that we have to be combative with our people is asinine. And I've never been that way. I've been with people in our company that have been that way. I've personally never been that way. There's been periods in my career where I probably haven't had the empathy that I should have, but we just got to love people. We got to love people. That's what we're called to do. There are people out there that do bad things, right? Somebody recently, and I was like, it's not a bad person. It's a person that's in doing bad things. So in other words, if that person, if we were able to slab off those behaviors, that's a good person. We're trying to lead people, our young people, in a way that they understand that you don't just have one future. There's an infinite number of futures out there for you. And some of them you damn well ought to run away from. Right? You shared with me that you should have run away from some of your futures. And I shared with you that I should have run away from some of my futures. And I think we kind of embraced the wrong future. And what we're just trying to teach our young people is when you get to this point, this future node, you're going to be faced with some decisions.
Yeah.
And let's think about decisions and at least make people aware that there are different options.
Yes.
Because I think for me coming out, it was, okay, work's over. Let's go grab a 6-pack of beer. Nobody's going to eat dinner until we all drink a 6-pack each.
Yep.
I didn't know there was another option. I mean, obviously I did, but from a I'm going to get along with everybody camaraderie standpoint, I'm going to be one of the guys standpoint, it wasn't another
Yep.
option for me.
Right.
And I was frankly pretty suggestible at that age, as a lot of
Yeah.
20-year-olds are, right? So we got to find a way to be suggestible toward things that create a better future and greater margins of safety in all those 5 areas of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of showing people that there are options and we get to pick what future we're going down. You sharing that story, which again, thank you. This is the second time I get to hear it, which I know, or maybe I assume that you're not the only human being that has had that experience in our industry. And then you said it at the Dirt World Summit. Did anybody connect with the story? What was the response in terms of what you shared and how the audience responded?
So, I mean, everybody clapped when I was down, and that was kind of it. But I did have a few people come over and thank me for sharing that. Now, I mean, I didn't talk to a lot of people. I was approached by a software salesman who wanted me to give him feedback on his product, and that took 15 minutes. And literally, I'm like, dude, you're not reading the room. I just poured my fucking heart out here. You want me to
For real.
It was brutal, man. I'm telling you. And I kept saying to him, he can talk to you. He can, no, I want your opinion. And I just said, I can't help you. But there were some other
Yeah.
people that, that came over and, heartfelt, thank you for sharing. And I think a lot of people, even people I work with, like we had, I think 10 people there. They never heard that.
Wow. Wow.
That was new to them.
So it was,
nobody in my life. I think you might have been the first one that I told that stuff to. That was right before.
man.
So nobody in my life knew that stuff. I mean, they may have known that the phone call happened, but not that I was going home writing my suicide. No.
Right. Right. Well, again, I get to brag, but I'm ultra grateful that you shared that with me before and now again. And what I want the L&M family members out there to learn or take away is you're not alone. And by sharing it, and what I love is you're sharing it to help people say, we gotta do better. And that Dirt World Summit is ballers, right? Like decision makers, influencers, big players in the industry. You shared super intimate, vulnerable stuff and said, we can do better. And I guarantee you there were people in the room that like, yep, they know, they've been there. And it gives what I think is the most impressive and thing that I'm like, oh man, I wish I could just read everybody's minds and see how many of these futures shifted direction a degree or two because of what you said. But it gives people permission to say, I have pain and I don't have to keep propagating that. I don't have to keep spreading it. I can do better because you are. I think
let's break that chain that's bound us, like my dad had a chain, my grandpa, whatever, my mom had chains. Let's break that chain. And my dad, I couldn't talk to him about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I could not talk to him. And I don't know, he never talked to me about his childhood, with his mom being so low, emotionally and mentally. He never talked to me about his childhood. They just wouldn't talk. And
right.
And I just think it's unfortunate, that people feel like there's not an outlet. Now, the other side of that is I think when we do see someone that's acting differently and we just check with them and say, okay, what is you're acting differently? Is there something you want to talk to? Like we can get you in touch with resources. And I think what they don't need is our advice.
Right.
Yes, I don't think
yes.
anybody needs my advice because I suck at it. I wouldn't I wouldn't have had all the problems I've had in my life if I didn't suck at it, right? And I mean, overall, I've got a friend that says, "Herb, you got the worst luck of anybody I know on the earth. You've also got the best luck of anybody I know on the earth. And lucky for you, your good luck outright your bad luck." So I just think it's important to have for us to model the vulnerability so that people feel comfortable because it's that vulnerability piece. I mean, it's not just when we have major problems. Like we need it when we have a team that wants to be creative. We
Yep.
need we
Yep.
need the people to step out, be willing to step out and go, okay, I'm inching out on the plank here. I'm going to say something, and hopefully nobody saws it off behind me. And I have a great example of when we were in strategic planning 3 or 4 years ago. One of our guys came up with an idea, and I have spent like hundreds of hours in a pickup truck with this guy. So I know him well. We,
Yeah.
as we do in this business, shit on each other all the time. And
Of course.
the good thing is, I'm just as open to that as he is, and so we work on each other that way. But he came up with this idea that wasn't a terrible idea, but I didn't like it.
Sure.
And I said, "That's the stupidest idea you've ever come up with." And so we took a break and we're walking over, and Tasha, our CFO, comes over. She says, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." She said, "When you just told Doug that was the stupidest idea you ever came up with, what you did is you told everybody else in that room, you better not say a word."
Ooh. Ouch.
And you talk about somebody, I mean, if there's a lot I can trust Tasha for, and one of them is see blind spots.
Yeah.
Just a wonderful human being, a great friend, a great employee, a great CFO. And when we sat back down, I just said, "Okay, I'm going to pour this out right now. You guys need," because everybody didn't know that Doug and I had this. I said, "You guys need to know that Doug and I got this thing going, and we can kind of overemphasize things. And so what I want you to know is you can say stuff and you're not going to be driven back in your home."
Yeah.
So we need
Yeah.
that at the job site level. If a laborer has a safety concern, we need
Yep.
him or her to be able to step up and say, "I saw this," and feel 100% comfortable doing that.
Yep.
That's the way we get better. So that vulnerability thing is something we need to model, and we need to cultivate with everybody
Yep.
we work with.
Yeah.
I'm better at
100%.
that now
I
than I
think,
was when I was 30.
yeah. I think there's a few things, because it's easy to think vulnerability means spilling my guts in
Yeah.
front of everybody and crying and getting messy about my emotions. Like maybe, but it's simple. Get comfortable with saying, "I don't know
Mhm.
and I need help." That's vulnerability. And if you're in a leadership position or responsible for guiding a group of people, the way you respond to problems is going to either shut it down, just like the example you gave is not exactly in alignment with this, but the way I respond to problem is going to signal to my team whether it's safe or not to surface problems. When I bite people's heads off, guess what they're going to do? They're going to hide problems. If I receive them and say, "Oh, what should we do about this?" They're going to bring more problems to us. In your example, you have this common relationship with somebody where you can have this kind of dialogue, and it's just the way you interact. Now, the person that there was two in my head, there were two big giant actions in vulnerability. One was your CFO getting out on that plank, like you said, to say, "Hey, you know what you just did?" Because there was risk for that. And then you saying, "Ooh, all right, let me go back and reset the room," which is
The only way you can do is
profound.
fall on your sword, right?
That's
We
it.
had a superintendent that had some safety issues, and
Yep.
I heard through the grapevine that they were actually running a pool on when somebody was going to be seriously injured on his job.
Oh God. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so I went to him and I said, I want you to know what's going on. I want you to know what's being said about you. Because I don't think this is you, but the way you come
Right.
across makes people feel like they can't bring things up. And the only way you can do this, the only way you can do this is go out there and fall on your own sword and say,
Yeah.
I understand that this has been said about me. I'm hurt by it, but I'm sure it's not just being made up. Like this isn't just being made up. And that also begins to, and he did that, and the crew respected him for it. But he also changed his
Yes.
behavior, right? He changed the way
Yes.
he addressed people. He changed his behavior, and suddenly now this guy's one of our leaders in terms of safety, in
Yeah.
terms of people respecting his safety prowess. And the other thing about that vulnerability thing is initiative is really tied closely to it. So
Mm.
if you take the initiative on, let's just say, Jesse, you're supposed to mow my lawn once a week, but
Yep.
you notice it's tall 5 days in. That's what happens in May, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
go, hey, Herb, I came over mowed your lawn 5 days in, and I hope you don't mind. And I go, what the hell are you thinking? You mow my lawn once
Yeah.
every 7 days, and don't bother me again about it. What are you going to do? You're going to mow my lawn in seven
So
days.
that's
But you're
it. Yep.
also, if you see something wrong, you're probably going to keep shut about it because you don't want to get slapped
Right.
around.
100%.
So there's vulnerability in initiative, and when you start to slam off that vulnerability, when you start to punish people for it, and kind of punish people
Yep.
for taking initiative, it's then okay. We're going to stay in the safe zone. We're going to stay 15% behind, that margin of
Yeah.
safety, and we're not going to give anything more than what you just paid me for.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. There is vulnerability in initiative because there is.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh, all right, Mr. Herb. So you've had, I got the final question coming up. It's an easy one.
All right.
Um, you, you've had tremendous impact in the industry, in people's lives and careers, in your community. You're writing the 100th year anniversary book, which I think's like that's probably one of those experiences that there's a very, very small number of people that even had to
Yeah.
wrestle with that idea. And so because of the years of experience and growth that you've had, I think this question is going to be a piece of cake, but super, super meaningful for everybody out there listening. So here's the question. What is the promise you are intended to be, Mr. Herb?
What is the promise I am intended to be?
Yes.
That's a twisted question. So I guess the way I'm reading that, I'm going to rephrase the question: what does God intend me to be? I would say what God intends me to be is someone that hopefully leads other people to understand that He's the place you need to go. He's the one you need to know. That you can reach out to Him, and He listens. And
Mm.
that's, I'll put it this way: I spent the better part of a half a century running away from God, and
Mm.
when my life got upended, 12, 13 years ago, Tasha, our CFO, was the one that said to me, you need community, like you had to come to church. And I went to church with her, and I told you earlier that suicide was just that off ramp for me. It was a rest area
Yep.
for me. I don't know how many times I would have gotten off that rest area without starting to plan it,
Mm.
without starting to go further with it. But she invited me to church, and just so happened her daughter, who was 14 or 15 at the time, played guitar, and she got up and did a solo. And it was like everybody else in that church moved aside, and she was singing directly to me.
Oh, wow.
And that's the day that, I always believed in God, but I always ran away from God. And that's the day I believed God is telling me it's time for you to come back.
Mm.
I've never had a suicidal thought since. It's never crossed my mind. And
Wow.
I believe God supplanted all that stuff.
Set the stage and say, come on home, Herb.
Yeah, that's so. If you ask me what I'm, I don't remember the question exactly, but I think I'm intended to help people see what can be if you have faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. I am not shocked that you would have such a deep and meaningful response to the question. Did you have fun?
Yeah, I appreciate it. It seriously is a privilege. And you mentioned that not many people get to write a 100th anniversary book, and it made me feel like, damn, I haven't been grateful enough for that privilege. Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, and that's such a privilege, but it's also a privilege to talk to you again and be here with you. And I'm kind of looking forward to those real tacos when we get back to San Antonio again.
Thank you for sticking it out all the way to the end. I know you got a whole lot of stuff going on. And in appreciation for the gift of time that you have given this episode, I want to offer you a free PDF of my book, Becoming the Promise You're Intended to Be. The link for that bad boy is down in the show notes. Hit it. You don't even have to give me your email address. There's a link in there. You just click that button and you can download the PDF. And if you share it with somebody that you know who might feel stuck or be caught up in self-destructive behaviors, that would be the ultimate. You sharing that increases the likelihood that it's going to help one more person. And if it does help one more person, then you're contributing to me becoming the promise I am intended to be. Be kind to yourself, be cool, and we'll talk at you next time.